Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Art of Being a Woman. I'm your host, Courtney, and this week we are discussing the art of strengthening your intuition. I chose this topic because I really want to bring awareness to the fact that we all have intuition. Some of us may know this already, but some of us might not. It is not exclusive to wise sages or psychics or people who we consider to be deeply spiritual. We all have intuition because we all have a soul, and our soul is connected to God, Source, the creator of everything. Perhaps you don't call it intuition. Maybe you call it your gut instinct, or you just call it discernment. But regardless of how we describe it, we all know what it feels like to know something before we can fully explain it. And I want us to strengthen that inner knowing within us because intuition is like a muscle. The more that we exercise it by listening to it, respecting it, and acting on it, the stronger and clearer it becomes. The more that we doubt it and ignore it or let ego and fear, anxiety get in the way, the harder it becomes to hear that inner knowing that we all have. I think it's very important that we constantly strengthen our intuition because when our intuition becomes stronger, life starts to feel smoother. We feel more sure of ourselves. We feel more confident in the decisions that we're making in life. And we trust ourselves more, no matter what life throws our way. We're going to discuss three main questions that I think will really help cover this topic so that you can really start strengthening your own intuition and reap the benefits of it yourself while also understanding how and why it works. But before we do that, I want to share some foundational spiritual knowledge that I think is very important for everyone to know that's on their spiritual journey. Number one, we are all intuitive because we all have a soul that is connected to God, to Source, which is, in other words, infinite energy. God is an infinite positive energy. Now, before we get into the details of the soul, I want to emphasize that we are truly our soul. We are not our physical body. We just take on a physical body when we come to this world, this physical reality, so that we can experience it. But when we pass away and when the loved ones that we have pass away, they don't die. They just leave their physical body. The physical body dies and their soul returns back to Source. There's obviously a lot of layers to that transition when someone passes, and I'm not going to get into it in this episode, but it's very fascinating. And if you are interested in learning more about that, I definitely recommend you look into Kabbalah, which dives into these topics very well. Now that we know that we are truly our soul, and our soul is a spark of God, we can allow ourselves to believe that our soul knows everything because God knows everything. Our soul knows our life purpose. It knows the why behind all of our experiences in life. It knows why we were born to the parents we were born to, the siblings that we were born to, if we have any. It knows why we go through certain ups and downs, so on and so forth. And that is because ultimately our soul chose all of this, which means we chose all of this. But part of that process of choosing to experience life in this reality is that you agree to forget that it was your choice. And that is because in this world, we are given free will. If we were to remember that we chose every experience, every challenge, and we knew exactly why we chose to experience it, our free will would not be fully free. It would not be fully honest. It would be easy to make the right choices and easy to avoid the more unnecessary choices. Because each and every one of us chose to have free will, when our soul is speaking to us, when our intuition is speaking to us, and we will get into what that really means, it's never going to be this loud voice. It's never going to be this immense pressure. It's going to be very soft, it's going to be subtle, and it's going to be a suggestion, almost as if a random idea just popped in your mind that sparks your curiosity because it's different from the other thoughts you have in your head and a little bit more out of the box, perhaps. from what you would have expected. Now, the reason why some of us do not hear this voice as often is because there's a competing voice that exists in our mind, and that is the ego, which I covered in a three-part series on my Instagram account, on my Threads account, and on this podcast, where I go into depth on who the ego is, how to recognize when the ego is testing you, and how to overcome the ego. I definitely recommend you check it out. It has definitely changed my perspective spiritually, and it makes it a lot easier for me to be mentally prepared every single day. But back to what we were talking about. We have this competing voice in our mind, which is the ego, that is always going to challenge our intuition. This sounds very annoying, and it is very annoying because it's what creates that indecision in our mind. It's what creates that doubt, that insecurity, criticism, the comparison. These are all different ways that the ego likes to distract us from what our soul, our intuition, is trying to guide us towards. And the thing is, the ego is very smart. It's not just going to tear you down and make you feel insecure out of nowhere. It's going to pretend to be supportive. It's going to pretend that it's keeping you safe, it's protecting you from getting your feelings hurt, and it's keeping you humble, perhaps. But ultimately, it has one goal and one goal only, and it's to really challenge our free will. The more that we listen to our ego, and we give into insecurity, we give into doubt, we give into fear, we give into anxiety, even superiority, inferiority. The bigger our ego gets, and the louder that voice becomes in our mind, which makes it even harder for us to hear our intuition. The same thing applies with our soul. The more that we listen to our intuition, even when it seems like it would be the more difficult path and it would be more challenging for us, the louder and more clear our intuition becomes. At first, when I was working on overcoming my ego, my intuition would pop in here and there, guiding me on much bigger picture things, such as beginning this podcast, starting to write, changing my writing format. That's usually how it showed up for me. And I realized over time that the more that I became familiar with this voice, the easier it was for me to detect it when it would suggest things to me in other areas of my life. For example, when I was beginning to walk outside in nature, at first it was just an idea in my mind. I was watching a video that a psychic medium posted, and she explained how she always clears her energy out by going for walks in nature, and she does this every single day. And I thought to myself, that sounds really nice, but I didn't really feel like taking it seriously. It wasn't until I noticed that the idea of going for a walk outside kept popping into my mind again and again. And it was odd to me because if that idea of going for a walk truly came from me and it didn't come from this higher version of myself, then I would have already gone on the walk, if that makes sense. It was interesting that this voice was giving me advice to do something that would better my life, even though I wasn't quite there yet. And so I decided, you know what? Let me listen to this voice. It's giving me good advice. There's nothing bad that can happen from me walking outside in nature. And let's see if this inspiration that I'm receiving is onto something. And from that day forward, I ended up becoming obsessed with walking. It's beneficial for us spiritually, emotionally, physically, and mentally, which is pretty insane if you think about it. I don't think there's many activities that we can participate in this world that target all four of those categories. The more that we listen to this voice and we take this intuition seriously, we're going to be able to receive intuition more frequently. It's almost as if our mind is like an algorithm. The more that we focus on and listen to our intuition, the more thoughts are going to come in from that source. And the more that we listen to the thoughts that are coming from our ego, that are coming from insecurity and doubt, the things that we mentioned, the more we're going to experience thoughts of that nature. That was a pretty deep, thorough dive in the foundation of spirituality. In my opinion, there's obviously so many layers to it, and I would love to discuss them all. Maybe I will in the future if you guys are open to that and curious about it. I would love to. But now that we've got the main gist out of the way, I want to get into 3 important questions. So let's just get very practical and focus on being action oriented. I feel like sometimes when we learn new information, or at least me, when I learn new information, that's the easy part. That's the fun part. I feel wiser. I feel like my mindset has been expanded. But the more challenging part is acting on what I've learned, especially if it's challenging the way that I'm living in the current moment. So I want to tackle that first and foremost. How do we strengthen our intuition? I'm going to list a few ways we can do this so that you can start practicing this right now in your daily life and experience the benefits as soon as possible. You can experience them today, and you probably will experience them today because life is constantly responding to the choices we make. One way we can strengthen our intuition is from practicing separating the ego from the soul. When a thought pops into our mind and it's critical of ourselves, it's critical of someone else, label it as the ego in your mind and don't entertain the thought further. I'll use the algorithm example that I said in the beginning and say, just keep scrolling. The same way that if you see a video on your feed and you don't like it and you keep scrolling, you don't even wait to finish the thought. Do the same thing when you notice that there's a thought in your mind that's coming from the ego. I just want to give you some key words on how the ego shows up in our mind so that you can know when it's testing you. The ego shows up like fear, doubt, panic, urgency, insecurity, negative self-talk, comparison, judgment, superiority, inferiority, control, obsession, needing proof. Whenever you're experiencing a feeling that triggers those things and a thought that triggers those things, know that it's all coming from the ego and it's a mental test, ultimately. Now, I'll give you some words for what the soul and the intuition sounds like and feels like. It feels clear. You feel mental clarity. You're not confused with reality. You feel grounded in reality and grounded in your physical body, in yourself. It feels direct. It feels simple. It feels peaceful. It feels firm. It feels loving. It feels neutral, patient, wise, not desperate, and not forceful. Other ways we can strengthen our intuition is stop feeding the ego, stop feeding that negative voice. Many times we can go into a negative spiral when we are feeling anxiety and fear and insecurity. Don't allow yourself to spiral because that feeds the ego and it makes the ego stronger. Next, listen to your intuition with small things, meaning if you just came home from a long day and you get this feeling like you want to go to bed early, that sounds like intuition to me, and you should listen to it. Do what you need to do so that you go to bed early because that is supportive for you mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. Also, you want to respect the nudges that you get. When you get that nudge to go to bed early, respect it. Because if you keep ignoring it, then that voice is going to get quieter and quieter, and you're not going to feel so connected to what your body wants and needs. And we need to take care of this body because it's the home of our soul. So even though we are a soul and we're not our body, if we do not take care of our physical body, then our soul suffers because it's distracted by the limitations of our body. I actually spoke about this a lot in last week's episode, how if we don't get a good night's sleep, if we are not physically active, if we are not prioritizing our health, then it's very hard to enjoy life. It's very hard to be motivated to really do anything that brings us joy, which ultimately is our purpose. It's to experience joy. It's just going to take some work to get there. This is something that we need to practice daily. There's no off days when it comes to listening to our intuition and overcoming our ego. Lastly, you'll end up strengthening your intuition through repetition. The more that you listen to the voice of your soul, the more trust you are building with your soul. And it will be able to give you bolder advice, bolder insight, and you will be able to trust it quickly because you've built that rapport with yourself. I do want to clarify something before I move on to the next question because it's something that I was a bit confused about when I first started learning about spirituality. And it's this: there is no such thing as a wrong choice in life. If we were to listen to our ego instead of our soul, nothing bad happens necessarily. It's just that we went off course spiritually, and eventually we will be guided back on course. It might just take longer for us to get there, and it might be a little bit more uncomfortable for us to get back on course. But ultimately, our soul has already agreed to experience every single possible choice we can possibly make in this life. It would just obviously be more enjoyable and beneficial for us if we listen to our soul, our intuition, more than our ego and not get caught up in the distractions of this physical world. Sometimes we choose our ego and it wakes us up the hard way, yes, but it still wakes us up and we end up really learning our lesson and accelerating our growth because of it. So there really isn't a good or bad choice. Everything just is what it is and you make the most out of it. Now, the next question I wanted to get into is, what does intuition look like in everyday life? Because we touched on this a little bit in the beginning of the episode. Intuition is not always going to be this dramatic, life altering download of information. You're not always going to be told to quit your job and move across the world and end your long term relationship of 10 years and start a business tomorrow. It's not always going to sound like that. Many times in everyday life, intuition will guide us to doing very slight adjustments to improve our overall quality of life and experience. For example, you might receive intuition to take a nap, drink water, go outside, get some fresh air, get some sunlight on your face, to pray, to journal, to hang up the phone when you've been on the phone for too long, to wait before responding to something someone says to you, to write something down that you heard that you think is important, to eat something healthy, and to not let fear hold you back. Those are quite a few ways that our intuition speaks to us every single day. And the more that we take these little nudges seriously, the more guidance we'll receive. And making decisions in life will honestly feel more and more effortless. We'll easily know the difference between doing something because it feels good for our soul, short term and long term, and we'll know when a decision is coming from insecurity and lack and fear. Lastly, I want to get into what happens when we ignore our intuition versus when we respect it and listen to it. I definitely gave an example here and there throughout the episode, but again, I just want to give you a list. I feel like it's a lot easier that way. And it's something that you can honestly write down very quickly as you're listening to this episode so that you can keep it in mind throughout your day. I did this last episode actually with the art of prioritizing your happiness. I listed the benefits of prioritizing your happiness and I listed the consequences because I think that when we are able to really see the reality of the choices we're making, it becomes easier to make a clear decision that has our best interest at heart. So let's get into it. What happens when we ignore our intuition? The ego gets louder, fear becomes more convincing and believable. We start doubting ourselves more. We need more validation from other people. We feel disconnected from our physical body. It becomes hard to know when we're really tired or really hungry or feeling sick. We feel mentally confused. We repeat life lessons longer than necessary. We make choices from fear, from lack, from insecurity. We feel out of alignment. And ultimately, we still fulfill our purpose, but through more resistance. And it'll take longer to accomplish. Now, what happens when we respect our intuition and we listen to it? more than we listen to our ego, our intuition becomes a lot clearer and obvious. Our self trust grows tremendously. It becomes a lot easier for us to make decisions in life. Our body feels physically safe. Our cortisol is not spiking as much. And we understand how to physically regulate ourselves in real time, no matter what challenges and obstacles might be surfacing in our life. We need less external validation from others. We feel more connected to God, source, energy. We recognize that we're in alignment a lot quicker. We recover from self doubt faster and perhaps other people doubting us faster. We move through life with more confidence and we fulfill our purpose with more ease because we're working with our soul, not against it. So I hope that this episode gave you something to really think about and not only think about, put into practice so that you can truly strengthen your intuition, of course, but also maximize your power in this world because we all have the ability to have very strong intuition and we all have the power to be a channel to receive downloads of information from God. So why not take advantage of it? If you enjoyed this episode, please rate this podcast and feel free to comment on this episode. Also, feel free to share this with a friend or family member if you think that they would enjoy this. And follow this podcast if you haven't yet. I would really appreciate it. And as always, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this topic, whether you agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. I'm open to all of it. You can message me on Threads or Instagram at She Is Artfully Woman. I hope you all have an amazing week. I love you all. Until next episode, bye for now.